Alright, so if you saw my last video, you already know this, but basically my FD RX7 has a little bit of an issue right now. And today I'm going to go ahead and start the first steps of the process of fixing that issue. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and start it up and let me see if you can figure out what the issue is. That battery is not having a good time. Neither is my alternator belt. Don't do that. It's a reliable car, I swear. Come on, man. It's cold. Anyway, now that I got it running, I'm going to let off the clutch and let me know if you notice anything off. You notice anything off? Anything weird? Anything out of the ordinary? No? Well, if you couldn't guess it, my transmission's third gear has turned to Swiss cheese. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull it into the driveway now and hopefully start working on fixing that. So, got a new steering wheel for that. Can't see that, it's not for your eyes. Alright. Alright, so now that I got the car in the driveway, the question is, what am I going to do to fix that? Now, the obvious answer would be to just swap in another stock FD RX7 transmission, because it's just plug and play. Unbolt the old one, take it out, put the new one in, bolt everything back up, call it a day. But after blowing one up, I can't say I really trust another one to stand the test of time. To be fair, the last one I drove on for a good like 4 or 5 years, and it went through like 5 or 6 drift events and all kinds of just stupid other driving that we won't get into. But yeah, to make a long story short, I don't really trust just swapping another one in, and also I couldn't really find another one nearby me that was in good shape anyway, especially not for a good price. So I went asking around in the local groups, and this came up. So if you don't recognize this right away, this is a Nissan 370Z CD009 transmission. And I got this thing for an absolute steal, because the dude locally to me who has a FD RX7 drag car was trying to sell it and get rid of it, get it out of the way, because he had just purchased a brand new from factory Nissan 350Z transmission to swap into his car, because he says when this one has when you hard shift into third in this one on a drag strip, it grinds a little. Otherwise it's perfect, and honestly I can live with that, especially for how little I got this thing for. He practically gave this thing to me for free with purchase of a clutch. So what we got here going on is we got a hydraulic throwout bearing, which is necessary because you can't really use the stock one for the FD, and the kit just kind of requires it, so luckily it came with that. And then here is the adapter kit that I'll be using. I forget the name of this one, but it's kind of an older one, but it'll work just fine. As you can see, it's all used. Not everything's in perfect shape, but I'll be cleaning everything up before I install it, just to kind of refresh as much as I can. And once I get that on, I'll be installing this OS Geiken twin disc clutch, which should hold all the power I could ever need. They gave me the alternator too because they're not sure if that's for an FC or an FD for the kit, so I'm just having that around just in case I need it. If I do end up using it, I'll probably just swap that housing out for the RX7 alternator that I have on my FD. This is a custom transmission mount bracket that the guy was using. I'm going to use that for now and maybe switch it out later, but if it works, it works. This car probably makes like 500-600 horsepower, so I doubt my 350 is really going to break that if it didn't break on his car. And then to tie everything together, got this beautiful piece of art from CD009 called a CD009 shifter. It's their short trans swap shifter for the CD009. And then because FD RX7s use a power plant frame to hold the transmission to the differential, I can't use that on this transmission because obviously it doesn't have any of the mounts for it. So to tie everything together in the rear end, I've got this differential brace from Sicky that I'll be installing as well. And then the last piece of the puzzle will be a custom drive shaft, which I'll have to get made after I get everything in because I need to get a measurement of the exact distance because I can't find any reference for that online of what the exact distance would be. So better just play it safe, put it all in, and then get a measurement and go get a drive shaft made. So with all that out of the way and explained, I'm going to go ahead and get this thing up off the ground on 4 jack stands and start getting the old transmission out of it. Okay, figure this out, that out. 12, 14, hard to tell. Now most people would have to go up underneath their transmission and disconnect a bunch of things down there, but I never liked that, so I installed a little plug right here. If I can just figure out where I need to push, I can just bypass that whole step. Let's see, I think it's like this. There we go. Sweet. The fluid doesn't look nearly as bad as it did after it blew up right now because I've already gone in, drained all the fluid, popped this whole lower pan, if you want to call it that, off and looked inside to assess the damage to be 100% sure it was actually broken gears. And yeah, it is, if I haven't already played that clip. Yeah, everything looks pretty good in here. Let me just spin it over a bit. Oh. Right. Well, that would solve the issue. But yeah, so this is not new fluid, but strained old fluid, because it's not going to make the transmission any worse. Alright, but now I'm going to get these off, start disconnecting this transmission. Okay. All right. You versus the guy she tells you not to worry about, am I right? Now, obviously, this already has a shifter built into it. The CD009 uses a kind of like a tripod sort of thing, so that is where this comes into play. But before I can actually mount this, this is the shifter rod, and I need to put a piece on this that will adapt to this piece. That's the first step. So, all right, so this is gonna slide in like this, right? Just like that. And then the spring pin will go in through here. And they say in the instructions, you need to make sure that it does not protrude past this line right here, otherwise it will interfere. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that on. I need a small hammer to make that go in, and yeah, gotta knock that out real quick and then get back to you. There we go. All right. Perfect. Okay. And I'm gonna take this off for safekeeping. Set that right there. Now this is the tricky part. Gonna have to kind of wedge this in at an angle. So I'm gonna slide it past here. Okay. Come on, line up. There we go. All right. Then you want to slide these down. And I'm pretty sure you use the inner ones for this. That one. Because this is a later model. Earlier models you would use these holes. And then I need spacers. I'm gonna go grab the instructions really quick to make sure I'm doing this right. Alright, instructions out. The ones with the little base are for early. I have a late model, so I'll use the bigger spacers. Come on. These out of the way. And these are gonna go right in here. Right there. Okay, and get the long bolts. Late model is B. I'll use the further in holes. I believe. It doesn't seem to be working right. Come on. There. And right there. Okay. Kind of force that to get threaded. Wherever the hole's at. Take the littler ones. Thread them into the sides. Come on. All right. Should we get this one done now? Okay. And then the 6-speed trans, you push down and over for reverse. Sweet. I just gotta get that all tightened up and that'll work perfectly. That is an insanely short throw, especially side to side. That's all you got. Not bad, honestly. Alright, so if you're unfamiliar with how these transmission swap kits work, it's a pretty basic concept. You take everything off, you got this big adapter plate, it's about a 1/2 inch, I'd say, thick. You got all these countersunk screws holding it in to the stock mounting locations, most of them at least. And then Mazda uses an actual bearing as a pilot bearing, as well as this little seal that is too small to fit over the input shaft of the CD009 transmission. So what Nissan uses is a, I believe, carbon impregnated brass bushing instead, which slides over perfectly. So we're gonna put this into the hole using something in the way as a barrier for not destroying this and destroying it instead, because if you hit that with a hammer, it will deform it and you won't be able to get your transmission in. And then once that's in, I have a spacer that'll be going right over the stock counterbalance for the rear. And then once that's installed, I'll be able to put the clutch in place, flywheel and all that, right? Get it all installed with the center alignment tool. And once that's all done, I can actually mount my transmission to the engine. However, with the location of the starter motor on the CD009, it's a little bit further out than the one on the 13B stock transmission would be. So you can see it's getting really close to my coils. That's not the biggest deal though. The problem is that if I were to put this in place, maybe take the alternator, it sits like this, and this has to be spaced out a bit for the kit for where it would sit. It'd sit right about there. And as you can see, it's really, really close to the transmission tunnel of the car. So what I'm gonna have to do is clearance right about here, just knock it in about a ½ inch or so. It doesn't need to be a whole lot, but just kind of clearance for the alternator so I can actually slide it in, because as it is right now, I would not even be able to put it into the car with the transmission in place. So in order to do that, I have a sheet of rubber to put in the way so I damage my paint as little as possible. And I have a small sledgehammer, and I'm just gonna do that for a little while until it's all kind of clearanced. I'm gonna do that, and once I'm done with that, I'll get back to you. Alright, got that knocked in just enough so that if I put the alternator in place, if I put the starter in place, that is, come on, goes right about there. And I don't know how well you can see that, but there's probably a good like fingers gap at the tightest point, so plenty of space to mount it, and all I need to do once the transmission is in the car. So get that out of the way, and I'm gonna go ahead and get that all assembled now. Just gonna thread locker these just a tiny bit. Oh, it doesn't have vibration now. Oh, it's gonna be remove. Switch on. That is. clutch installed and torque to spec. Time to fit the transmission up. Now I do need to get a custom clutch line. That is not really my biggest concern at the moment though. All I gotta do is just get a new 6AN line made and then adapt it to a banjo bolt fitting so I can actually hook that up, but then that'll be all fine, whatever. For now, I just want to get the transmission in the car so that I can get that measurement for the drive shaft so I can get that made. So, Alright, well, it's a little bit windy today, so apologies if it's harder to hear me, but well, last time you saw me, I was trying to get this in and I was having some difficulties. I just couldn't quite get the input shaft to go high enough to slide in here, and I'm pretty sure that was because it was hitting right about here. So I did a little more clearancing, and I'm thinking that the longer sloping bell housing should have enough clearance now to be able to slide up through here and get the input shaft in. And once I can get the input shaft to go in the hole, it should be pretty much smooth sailing from there. So let me go ahead and see if we can do that now. All right, so unfortunately that is still just not letting me in. So the only other way that I can think of to make this work, because like I've even tried, you know, lifting up the front of the engine, kind of tilting it back, and it's just not, I just can't get it in far enough to clear the bell housings of the trans tunnel. So my next shot that I'm going to try is to attach the engine to my engine crane, and I'm going to be removing all these subframe bolts and nuts to actually lower the subframe down in order to line up the engine with the transmission. I don't have to push it in and then push everything up, and fingers crossed, hopefully everything will line up once I do that enough to fit in place, because I know this thing will fit in this chassis. It was in another guy's already, so it should definitely fit in mine. It's just a matter of getting it to go. All right, well, that was a struggle, but there is officially a Nissan 370Z transmission in my FD RX7. I even got the alternator to fit. The alternator, or I gotta keep saying alternator, the starter motor fits fine. Honestly, like there's a little bit of a clearance issue right here, but like it just barely squeezes in. This top bolt, on the other hand, was another issue right there, because originally it's just a straight through hole that uses a bolt and nut design, so I was thinking I could just push it through this way and put a nut right there, but turns out it actually goes in and threads into the plate. So what I ended up having to do was clearance a little higher up, a very specific like small area clearance to get that bolt sliding, because it just was not getting the right angle no matter what I did. This starter motor is really, really ugly. I'm going to be swapping out, basically, like I need this housing, but the motor and the solenoid, you can actually just swap between housings. So I already did that to put an RX-8 motor on my FD RX7's transmission, and now this, I'm pretty sure, is like an FC starter motor, so I'm going to be using that to put an RX-8 starter motor and solenoid onto the FC housing. That should work just fine. It's actually a little bit shorter too, so it actually will make that clearance a little bit better. But now, last thing I gotta do before I can get that measurement is install my rear subframe brace. So let me get that out and start doing that. Alright, sorry that I skipped over that. GoPro's charging and I just honestly didn't want to wait. I'm kind of on a little bit of a time crunch lately, but got this thing all the way in. Unfortunately, there's a factory brace that goes here on later model cars. You have to delete that to run this, but I think this is a bit of an upgrade beyond the little flimsy bars that come with from factory. So I'm okay with that, but basically just bolt it in these 4 spots, and then you attach the actual part to the differential and put the bushing in there and all that, and good to go, tighten everything, right? So if you happen to be doing this swap on your own car and you're watching this for information on that, I'll save you some time. The distance from the face of this flange to the face of the seal of the transmission is almost exactly 42 inches. I would measure yourself just to make absolutely certain, or maybe if you want, you can trust me and just go grab, you know, a custom drive shaft made to that length. But I'm going to take those measurements down to my local drive shaft shop and get one made for this car, and I'll get back to you when I have that. Hopefully that's not too long from now, because I'd very much like to finish this thing as soon as possible. Alright, so I was honestly planning on just doing this off camera, but I figured I'd go ahead and include it anyway. So the kit that I'm using uses a FC, I'm pretty sure an FC starter. You see they're basically about the same size. Let's say the motor on the FC is a little bit longer than what I have. But I have, you know, I'm putting it on an FD, so I have the FD transmission base for the starter. If you look, it's hard to tell, there we go. They're a little bit different. These holes are much wider on the FD than they are on the FC. So I could honestly probably just run this one, or I could go get a brand new one, a brand new FC starter, and run that. But I already have what I did back in Japan, which was swap out a RX8 2 kilowatt starter onto my FD's housing, and I'd rather keep that than use this crusty old FC starter that who even knows if it's good, you know? So to swap this out, it's pretty simple. All you're gonna do is you swap this out. So first of all, you got the 2 screws right here. I'm gonna take those out. And that will release your solenoid. Just pull that out. You don't need to be too careful with the old one. Obviously, you're not going to be using it, so and I'm going to leave that in there. And then you're going to use an 8mm and take off these. And with that out of the way, should be able to get this to pull out. Might take a little bit of finagling, but a screwdriver might also help. Go. And you pop that off. It's gonna look like that, and then it's gonna look like that. You got all these stationary gear, or these what do you call them, planetary gears in here. And so you're just gonna slide the gear off of the other starter that you're using onto this. And I would re-grease this, but honestly it doesn't look too bad. Maybe in here a bit. Yeah, I feel like this is actually how the starter works. Just got this little piece in there that'll engage that. That's the solenoid portion, and then the actual turning happens with the planetary gears. So you just repeat that on the other starter that you want to keep the motor from. Whatever. Anyway, so take the housing that I want to keep without losing ball bearings. There's a little ball bearing that goes right in there. You don't want to lose that. And then just figure out where it would line up. Right about there. Come on. got a few more tools out here because for the last like 30 minutes or so I've been struggling trying to figure out what's going on with this. But what seems to be the issue was something I was not aware of, is apparently these gears are slightly different. I think the this is the FC, this is the RX7/FD gears, and it's really hard to tell. You probably won't be able to tell on camera, but the FC gears are just a little bit closer together than these. And I thought it was this inner bushing right here keeping me from getting in with like maybe a bigger shaft, but it turns out it's actually just bigger gears and they just wouldn't mesh up. So an extra step you'll need to do if you're doing this specific changeover is to replace the planetary gears and everything with the ones out of the RX-8 or FD starter. So simple enough. You basically just remove the little rubber grommet here, you pull out this little wishbone thing is going to come with it, and you're going to want to replace that when you put it back in. And so also there's nothing really holding this little plastic piece in, but I found that on the FC one it was actually fighting me quite a bit. It was just kind of jammed in there, so be wary of that. You may have to do a little bit of work to get that out, but otherwise not too terribly bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and lubricate this thing up just a little bit just to be sure it's nice and lubed, so it's not gonna wear down in there over time. And then stick that on right there, get the FC housing, and that's gonna fall off, of course. See, it goes like this, yeah, pretty sure it goes like this. And then you're gonna line up the, there's a little like, I know you call it like a bulge on the outside of each end, and then there's a little cut in where the screws go, so you want to line it up like that to clock it. And then you're gonna have to align it with the bushing down here so that it'll slip in just like that. And then I found with this it's still a little tight, so you gotta really push it in to make it all line up down there, but that's perfect now. So then easy enough, you just replace the little cover plate for this, get your rubber sort of grommet back in place. I think that's mostly for like water proofing this. And then grab this, which is gonna go like this. Again, probably just for waterproofing to some degree. And make sure you grab the right starter, line up those holes for where the screws are gonna go, pop it in. Okay, and those are both kind of biting in. Then you just grab your starter, click it onto the little wishbone piece. Gotta get it kind of in and under. Come on. There we go. And then once you got that in, just clock it to where the screws will line up, same as the actual motor. Just like that. Also, if I didn't mention it, when you have these things apart, it's a good opportunity to just kind of re-grease everything, clean it up. Good for longevity and all that. I kind of did that all off camera. Just get these tightened up. Go, and good to go. Now I just got to go install this on the car, and it hopefully will not give me any issues like it kind of feels like it's doing right now. That's weird. Okay, good opportunity for learning here. I'm pretty sure I did this wrong, so if your gear wheel is coming down like this without, you know, just on its own like that, then more than likely you've got the wishbone the wrong way around. So Gotta fix that real quick. Not too hard. So, shoe washing at home. Apparently this goes in this sort of orientation, where at the higher end and the inside is facing the motor. Should have paid more attention to that while installing it, but whatever, live and learn. Yeah. That way the actual solenoid will press down on this to hold it away from the flywheel gear whenever the engine's running, and then when you hit the switch, it'll actually pull it up to push it in place. Anyway, let me get this back in and get back on putting it in the car. Alright, so obviously the car is back in the ground and I got everything finished up. The 42-inch drive shaft I got made fit perfectly. Got the clutch line all bled. Didn't really have too many issues with that, honestly. If you're curious, I used a 2-foot run of 6AN brake hose, braided stuff, right, and a couple adapters to make it work. And that was, like, honestly a little too much length, so you could probably get away with something like 20 or maybe even 18 inches, but that's just what I used. Now one issue I did run into with this is that the engine seems to sit a little higher than the transmission wants to sit. Like, I got the rear of the transmission mounted up like as high as it'll really go until like the shifter's like poking through the hole in the floor, and the front of the engine was just kind of like leaning back because of that. So I ended up, what I did with that is my mounts are made out of aluminum, so I just took them down to the local machine shop, got them cut down to be a little this thing is about a ½ inch lower than it used to be. And I was talking to Mike at Angels Motorsports about that, and he said it's probably just because of my my aluminum oil pan is thicker, because the base is, you know, made of aluminum, so it's not like super thin like steel is. So that might have had a little bit of contribution to it, but honestly, I kind of feel like it's also just the fact the trans just sits lower in the car too, so you might run into that issue. Now, as far as difficulty of this swap, if you're watching this to, if you're watching this to kind of get a glimpse into what goes into the swap in case you're trying to do it to your car, I will say this was an incredibly difficult swap if you do it the way I did. If you're doing it yourself, in your car at home, you're watching this for guidance or anything like that, word of advice, don't do it like I did. Drop the engine so first step, right, remove your power plant frame and your drive shaft, and then just drop your whole engine and trans together from the subframe with the car lifted up in the air, and do everything on the ground like that. Because with the design of the bell housing on the CD009 transmission, it doesn't slope super far down quickly like the FD trans does. It kind of has a more sloped sort of design to it, and that caused a lot of issues with trying to get the bolts and stuff in the back, especially with the whole thing being pressed back by about a ½ inch due to the adapter plate. So yeah, it was a pain getting all those getting into all those tight spaces to get those things tight. I had to make a couple custom tools, and ended up kind of lowering it down a little bit with the subframe too anyway, just to get the top two. I managed it, but again, like I said, just do it the right way. Drop everything out of the car, do it outside the car, and then put it all back up inside. That'll be a lot easier than the way I did it. You'd probably even get it done in less than like a week, like how long it took me, because between work and other stuff, this thing took forever. But I'm gonna go ahead and take you guys along for a quick test drive, see how it handles, and if I have anything noteworthy worth saying towards how it feels with the new transmission in the car. So let's go do that and I'll get back to you. right, overall, that's actually really nice. The clutch I'm using, the OS Gaikin twin disc, it's a beast of a clutch. It does not have a very forgiving grab point, but like overall, honestly, it felt great, and it grabs nice and solidly, so it's a real nice, confident feeling towards it. The RPMs are a little higher than they used to be, which honestly not the biggest deal to me. It's a rotary, they like RPMs anyway, but you know, something to bear in mind if you're swapping yours out. Now I do have an RS slash RZ rear diff, which has a lower final drive. I forget the exact numbers. I think it's like 3.9 compared to 4 or something along those lines. In any case, it'll give you more RPM in general, so better, you know, better acceleration and stuff. If you have a USDM car, more than likely you have the, you know, the longer final drive, and so you won't see as many RPM gain as I have here, but you'll still see some because of the lower gearing in the transmission. But honestly, like I said, it's really good for the gears if you're, you know, tracking the car and stuff. This is kind of a street car, but also I mostly wanted it to be a track car, so I think it'll be actually perfect on track. And yeah, other than that, like, no, it feels great. The shifts are great. It is a little weird trying to find 5th and 6th because it seems like the shifter wants to go over just a little too far and wants to, like, kind of, what's the word, kind of like hits a wall. You got to kind of come in a little bit and find the gear, but I'm kind of getting used to that. It's getting a little easier, and yeah, I'm happy with it. Now I don't need to worry about transmissions blowing up anymore, so when the time comes and I want to add more power to this thing, I really don't need to worry about the drivetrain pretty much at all. Like maybe the rear diff a little bit, no hard launches, but I mean, it's got a Cusco 1.5 way in it, so I'm not too worried about the differential, but the casings can be a little weak sometimes. So keep you up to speed on that. I do plan on tuning this thing for 85 in the near future. Can't tell you exactly how near that future will be, but I do plan on bumping up the horsepower a little bit by doing that, because this thing is fast, but 350 is not really what I wanted out of it. So needless to say, I'm gonna have to do something to change something to make that happen, but that's for another day. Until then, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.